list items to hold all of the HTML, then concatenating the HTML elements onto that variable so that you, after the loop has finished, can render all of them in one go. So just to go through this is a three-part challenge where you first create the empty variable, which you should call list items. That should eventually hold all of the HTML for the list items. But to begin with, you are going to assign it to an empty string. Then inside of the for loop, instead of manipulating the DOM every single time the loop runs in every iteration of the loop, you're going to rather add the item, this one right here, to the list items variable instead of using the inner HTML on the unordered list itself. And then finally, after the for loop has completed, then you can take the list items, which now contain all of the HTML. instead of setting the inner HTML directly. So this is simply replacing this here with list items. And now, after this code has been running 3 times, 1 for each lead in our array, this list items variable should contain all of the HTML we need. So then we can render it out by doing ull.innerHTML equals list items, like that. Let's try this, run the code, and as you can see, we get the exact same result, meaning that it works. If you're still a little bit confused of what's going on here, I would recommend you to, for example, console log out the value of list items so that you get to see what the value of that string is in every iteration throughout the loop. And once you feel you have a good grasp of this, we'll move on to the next lesson. If you find yourself struggling to remember as to whether or not the performant way was to do .innerHTML inside of the loop or outside of the loop, you can remember this sentence. DOM manipulation comes with a cost. And with that, you can ask, well, if it comes with a cost, is it best to manipulate the DOM, namely using innerHTML, 3 times inside of the for loop? Or is it best to just do it 1 time outside of the for loop? Well, if it has a cost, you'd prefer to do it 1 time than 3 times. Let's try this, run the code, and as you can see, items down here under line 16 just to inspect how it looks in every iteration of the loop. So feel free to jump in and do that right now, and when you are ready, I will see you in the next lesson. Many of the pieces of our app working, let's stitch them together so that when a user enters a lead and hits the save input button, it'll actually be rendered out, opposed to us having to actually add the dummy data from the get-go, hard coding it here on line 1. So I'm gonna remove these lines, and your job is split into two. First, you are to wrap the code below, that is from line 13 to 17, in a render leads function. And then you are to call render leads function inside of the event handler for the button clicks. And I'm going to remove this console log right here to make it a bit cleaner. So just to talk through the logic here, what will happen is that when the user adds something into the input field and hits the save input, this epic lead, as you know, will be pushed to the my leads array. And then if we call the render leads and have this wrapped inside of that render leads function, it should, according to our plan, render out whatever items there are inside of the my leads array. It would be much better than what we have now, where simply I can hit the save input as much as I want, but nothing happens. My lead just stays in the input field. Not good. So go ahead and try to knock this one out. hopefully that went well. Now let's do this. I'll write function, render leads, and then the body of the function. Inside of that, I will copy this code, also tab it out so that it's easier to read, like this, looking good. And then we are to call the render leads function. We do that by doing render leads and adding the open and close parentheses. Now, if we run the code, www.epiclead.com, save input, yes, it works. We do www.awesomelead.com. Woohoo! It actually works. Really good job. Now we have stitched together the various pieces of our app, and we have what looks like a functional prototype. You should be really proud of yourself reaching this far. So give yourself a pat on the back, and when you are ready, let's move on. So, while our app now works, it has a little bit of a usability issue, because if I now try to add a lead here and hit save, you can see it is indeed saved, but it still persists in the input field as well. Most likely we'd want to clear out this input field. So that is what I now want you to do here on line 8, clear out the input field, though I haven't told you how to do that. And that is intentional, because now I want you to Google it. And even better, I want you to try to figure out on your own what you want to write into Google to try to solve this issue. So I'm not going to give you the text you are to paste into Google this time. You just have to try and figure that out on your own and see if you can find the answer, because that's a critical skill as a developer. You'll come across problems out in the wild every single day, and you won't have me there to tell you what to Google. So you obviously have to learn how to think of a phrase to Google yourself. So go ahead and do that. Try to figure out how you can clear the input field. Write the code you think works, test it out, and then of course return back to the screencast when you want to see my solution. Great job. Let's move on.
Sasuke.
makes our entire code and syntax highlighting, seen by the fact that the syntax highlighting is completely off at this point. So in the next cast, I'm going to teach you about template strings, which will solve exactly that. So just stay tuned and I'll see you there. Okay, now our about template strings, which will solve exactly that. So just stay tuned and I'll see you there. So in order to make this expression a lot simpler, we'll use what's called template strings. And to make it super clear for you, the benefit of template strings, I'm actually going to comment out this current string and then on a new line create the template string, so that you can compare the two. And the way you turn a normal string into a template string is by replacing the quotes that wrap the string with backticks instead. So let's do that and pay attention to what happens with the syntax highlighting of my leads and the plus operators when we do that. Then we do that and that. As you can see, it all just became blue. So now, this is no longer a JavaScript expression. It's just a string. But we are of course going to fix that after we've looked at the first huge benefit with template strings, which is you can break it into multiple lines. Something we couldn't do with a normal double quote string up here. So this gives us the opportunity to write our HTML much like our HTML looks like in an HTML file, like this. This is a much easier expression for us humans to parse than this one up here. So now we have that, it's time to take these sections here, which previously rendered out the leads, but now just are plain strings, and simply delete them and replace them with a $sign, open and close curly brackets. Then passing in whatever JavaScript expression we want inside there. This is how you kind of escape out of the string and shove a JavaScript expression into the string. In my opinion, much easier than what we had here with the quote, the plus, then the expression, then another plus, then a quote. Simply replace all that with this. And now if you want to go even further, we can add the contents of the anchor tag in a new line so that we get this really nicely formatted expression. It looks just like we would write it in the HTML file. If we now run this code, save the input, it works just as it did previously. But now we have point here is that you're going to get your hands dirty with template strings. Are going to practice template strings, or template literals, as people also call it. I prefer template strings though, as that's just an easier expression. Your job is to take this string, which is a concatenation of two hard-coded strings and a variable, and turn it into a template string. I'm console logging it down here on line 8 so that you can see results. If we run it, you can see that it says, "Hey James, how's it going? Chairs pair." So go ahead and change this from a standard double quote string into a template string. And then of course I will show you the solution when you are done. Okay, hopefully this went well. Let's do this. I'll start by simply replacing the first double quote with a backtick and the last double quote with a backtick. Then the entire thing is a string, so now if we run this, it'll say, "Hey, plus recipient, how's it going?" Obviously not what we want. We want James to be logged out as well, so we can remove all of this clutter, all of these plus quotes, and do $, open and close curly brackets, and then type in recipient. Run this. Yes, it's now a template string. Great job. make our email variable even more dynamic so that it also can take a sender value, which is the person sending the email. So you are to create a new variable, call it sender, and set its value to your name. Then in the email template string, you are to use your sender variable instead of pair. You're going to replace this text with your variable. Then just run the code and you will verify that it works through the console log. Good luck. Sender, and I'll actually set it to my entire name here, Harold, so that we can see that it actually works when we log it out. Escaping out of the string and sender like that. Run this. Yes, now we are logging out my entire name at the end of the string. Great job. Big benefit with template strings is that you can break them into multiple lines, which is really handy. For example, in our email case here, you'd most likely want to write this on multiple lines, like have the hey in one line and have the text in one line and then the shares in the final line. And this is possible, unlike with regular strings, like we're using here for my name. To prove that, let's actually try to break this into another line. What you see here is that we get these red underlines and the syntax highlighting has been completely broken. And if we try to run this, we'll see that we get a syntax error. So obviously not something we can do. We have to get it back on one line. But for our template strings, it will work, and that is the challenge as well. I want you to break the email string into multiple lines, however you think it makes sense to do that. And then you are to run the code to see that it works. However, there's a gotcha here, which is that in the Scrimba console, you will only see one line regardless of how many lines the string actually consists. Here is an example where I've created this random string, which is on 3 different lines. You can see that in the Scrimba console, we're logging it out on a single line. Whereas in the DevTools, which I've opened here, in the console that lives in the DevTools, it is indeed logged out over 3 lines. So this is a quirk with the Scrimba console. It's not as robust as the Chrome console, basically. So for this challenge, you will have to open up the original browser console in order to verify that you've done it correctly. And if you don't know how to open the developer tools, I will show you now. When you're in the Scrim, move your cursor up to the header area of the Scrim, then right click so that you open this menu, click on Inspect. That'll open up the developer tools. Make sure you are on the console tab. Now, of course, this is how it works in Chrome, and I'm on a Mac computer myself. So if you are on a different operating system and using a different browser, it might be slightly different ways of opening up the console, but that shouldn't be a problem. If so, you just need to Google it out, how to open the console on Windows using Firefox, for example. So go ahead now, break the email string into multiple lines, log it out, and then open the console to verify that you've done it correctly. Logged it out. The original big benefit with template strings is it became multiple lines. Great job. Okay, we are back at our Chrome extension app, and now you are going to do the same thing I did before we went on our little tangent about template strings, which is to take this list items and turn the string here into a template string, so that you can get rid of all of these pluses, all of these double quotes, and also break it into multiple lines if you want. So go ahead and do that right now. exactly how we want it to. So let's move on. Now let's take a little break from JavaScript and head over to our index.css file, because I want you to style our list according to the provided design. And here is the provided design. You can see the links have the same color as the rest of our app. We don't have the bullet points, which you can see are here in the current example. So I want you to fix that. And the three selectors you are to use are the UL, LI, set them up for you. So you just have to write a few CSS properties and values inside of these. And then once you're done, return back to the screencast, because then I also will show you my solution. way to remove those are to list, style, and then none. As you can see, they are gone. Now there's the space on the left hand side, namely the padding which we have here, which you also want to eradicate. So we'll do padding left and set that to 0. All right. Next up, the most obvious thing is the color of the anchor tags. It should be the green one we have already in our app. So let's fix that. We'll do this one right here and select the anchor tag. Color should be that. Yes, pretty good. Let's compare the two now. What I think is that we have some more spacing here. There's more spacing between the list items and also a little bit more spacing above the unordered list. So starting with the unordered list, I think we can give it a margin top of like 20 pixels, slightly down. And for the LI elements, I think we can give them also a margin top, maybe then 5 pixels. Yeah, now they have a little bit more space in between them. So I think this looks pretty good. So this challenge is done. But before we move on, there's one thing I want to point out, and that is that we are using very broad selectors for our CSS. We're basically selecting any unordered list or any list item or any anchor tag on the page. And this comes with the consequence that if we, for example, want to home and we add awesome lead, it's in the same page. And this comes with the consequence that if we, for example, want to add other anchor tags in our app that are outside of this list of leads, for example, let's say we added an anchor tag in the very top of our app, kind of like a navigation. If we run this, you can see it says home and we add awesome lead, it's in the same styling as awesome lead. This might not be what we want. Oftentimes, anchor tags and links will look slightly different depending on the context they were shown in. What we could do to solve this problem would be to, down here, when we are flipping the color, specify that we only want to do that if the anchor tag lives inside of a list item. And we'd solve that by doing LI and then a space and then the A. Now you can see the home link has the standard styling, whereas the anchor tag in our list has our green styling. So this is a way of saying only target anchor tags that lives inside of list items. However, in this case, we can get away by just targeting our anchor tags, as we're not planning to add any other anchor tags across the page. So we can remove our home tag and then just target this list item in the easiest possible way, which is what we have here, as that's perfectly fine to do as long as we're understanding the future possible consequences of doing that. And now I think we do that. So let's just move on. So, even though we haven't completed our app yet, there's still many features left to build. I want to go ahead and deploy it right away, because I just think it's so much fun to actually see your app out in the wild, and that gives me a ton of motivation to continue on, which is why I often like to deploy my projects as early as possible. So, in this cast, we're going to prepare our first deployment, so that we in the next cast actually can do the deployment and try our app out in the Chrome browser. As you can see on the left hand side here, I've added a couple of new files, namely the icon.png. That's just a PNG image, which looks like this little icon right here. Pretty suitable for our app with this $sign as our sales representatives, or to be reminded that this app will bring in more dollars for their commissions. Also, you'll see a manifest.json file at the bottom here. And you might wonder, well, what is JSON? I've never seen that before. And you're right, we haven't talked about that earlier, but don't worry, it's nothing dangerous. JSON is short for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's a way for us developers to store and send data. And it's often used when you, for example, want to send a piece of data from a server to a client, that is, to a browser. And in our case, we are using this manifest.json file to configure our app and to provide metadata about it. So Google Chrome will read through this and look at the name. Oh, it's called Leads Tracker. Well, then Google Chrome will give our app the name Leads Tracker. It'll also see that the version is 1.0, so that the next time we deploy and we change this to, for example, 1.1, it'll know that, oh, we have updated our version. And that's information that's definitely useful to know for Google Chrome. One thing you might wonder here is why these key value pairs, as you can see, which you hopefully recognize from JavaScript objects, have keys that are wrapped in quotes. Because if you remember from when we worked with JavaScript objects previously, we didn't use quotes around our keys. That's something you have to do when writing JSON. So don't be tempted to think that this actually is a JavaScript object right now. It's not, it's just plain text, but it's using the JavaScript object notation. So it's mimicking JavaScript object, and you later learn how to turn a JSON object into a JavaScript object. If this is a little bit confusing, don't worry about it. It'll sort itself out as we look more into this. Let's just move on and look at the two final key value pairs here. We have manifest version, and that's just telling it configures what happens the user clicks on our application from the Google Chrome extensions toolbar. Let me show you that. Here we have Twitter, and if I click on the extensions button up here in the top right corner, this little puzzle piece, you can see it opens up all of my extensions. And when I click at, for example, Grammarly for Pro, it opens up the Grammarly extension. And as you can see, it uses a little icon here as well. So in the action, the default icon that you provide, this icon PNG here, which points to this image file we've provided, will pop up here besides this puzzle piece button. And also the default pop-up, the index.html that we provide inside of our action, well, it's our pop-up. And in our case, it'll simply be the HTML we have been building all along. Now, there's one thing we need to fix, which is that the Chrome extension will only be as wide as it needs to be, and strictly speaking, our app doesn't need to be any wider than this, because that's the width our button needs. So we need to set a min width on the index.css, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Min width of 400 pixels, for example. Now you can see, if we go below 400 pixels, our input field is now outside of the app, so Google Chrome will understand that we don't want that, we want our app to be like this. This is the minimum size. So now we finally have everything in place. Your next step is to download this code. You do that by clicking on the settings icon in the bottom right corner and download as zip. That'll download a zipped folder. You can then open that zipped folder, for example, in your dev directory. Call it whatever you want. Here you can see all of the files that you recognize, along with the README file, which you can safely ignore or delete. That's up to you. And when you have that, we are ready to deploy our Chrome extension. So let's just move on to the next cast and do exactly that. Okay, it is time to deploy our application, and I'm so excited about this because I just love seeing products move out into the world and start solving problems for people. So let's just jump into this. The first thing you need to do is to head over to Chrome-//extensions. That'll bring up this UI you can see right here, which lists out all of your extensions. Now, this address here is a little bit funky, so you can just copy it from the file right here and paste it into your address bar if you want to do that. And once you're there, I want you to trigger the developer mode on. So just click up here in the top right corner, and then you'll see these three buttons appear: load unpacked, pack extension, and update. And you are going to load an unpacked extension. So click that button. That'll bring up the file chooser menu. There you are to navigate to the leads tracker folder that we downloaded from Scrimba in the previous cast. Choose that folder and hit select. And once you've done that, boom, your lead tracker is now in the extensions interface. And actually, that's it. Now, if we open up another tab, for example, I'll open up if you want to do that in the top right corner, and then you'll see these three buttons appear: load unpacked, pack extension, and update. And you are going to load an unpacked extension. So click that button. That'll bring up the file chooser menu. There you are to navigate to the leads tracker folder that we downloaded from Scrimba in the previous cast. Choose that folder and hit select. And once you've done that, boom, your lead tracker is now in the extensions interface. And actually, that's it. Now, if we open up another tab, for example, I'll open up the LinkedIn profile of Frode, one of the co-founders of Scrimba, and then I can click on the puzzle icon here in the top right corner. That'll bring up all my extensions, and there we can see our lead tracker. That is just so cool. You can see the little icon here. If we click it, it brings up the user interface for our app. So that is amazing. Now I can, for example, write in the URL we're at the moment and hit save input, and there it is saved. So actually now we have something that you can take with you on every website you visit and save information. But our app has a critical flaw. Because if I now close this app, if I click outside of our HTML file and it closes automatically, and then want to open it up again, actually our leads have been deleted. Because that's just as if we were saving something to the input here, and then seeing it in the list, and then refreshing the page, and boom, it's gone again. So every time we open up our Chrome extension, it's a full refresh. So we need to learn how we can store data across hrefreshes. How do we do that? That's not something you've learned yet, but it's not that hard. So over the next few casts, I'm going to teach you exactly that, so that our app becomes truly useful for salespeople who need to traverse the web and gather leads. So let's just move on and get that sorted out.